Hello, friends, and welcome. This is episode 20 of Syracuse Sports. My name is Brent Axe. Great to have you here. Did I just say episode 20 of Syracuse Sports? We've hit the 20 mark already. Fantastic. So if you've listened to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or all 20, we appreciate that. We would also appreciate if you subscribe. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe, follow, and that way you get new episodes delivered to you when they happen, all presented by our friends at Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare provider of SU Athletics. Another quick reminder for you here that Emily Leiker and I, my colleague from syracuse.com, we've been doing it live after every Syracuse football game. We're giving you post-game coverage, which you can see live on YouTube. So subscribe to Syracuse Orange Sports. Put it up here on the screen for you if you're watching on YouTube, so you can see where to subscribe in order to see us live on our Facebook page as well, Syracuse Orange Football on syracuse.com. But if you can't catch us live, which is great because that way your comments get in there, hey, we do the podcast thing as well. But after every SU football game, it's Emily and I. So next one is coming Saturday after the Orange take on North Carolina. Of course, Syracuse looking to bounce back after that loss to Clemson this week, entering a brutal stretch here. Lost to Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, both those two on the road. So we'll see how the Orange can swing it there. And Emily and I will be with you not only live, but on podcast form and here on YouTube as well. We have a voicemail line. If you want to leave us a voicemail, get it off your chest when you're watching Syracuse Sports and just got to vent a little bit, that's what the voice line's there for. 315-552-1964. We had a fun voicemail. Shout out to Bill from Cortland, who was feeling it at halftime, had to get it off his chest a little bit, and we played the voicemail on the post-game show after the Clemson game. So you can get in touch with me there on Twitter, of course, as well at Brent Axe Media, and our email is baxe@syracuse.com. Now, it's incredible to think about that the Syracuse Crunch are entering their 30th year in Central New York. Now, those of you that go back in the day, and I'm going to show you this shirt that I'm wearing here. This is a Syracuse Bulldog shirt. Okay, of course, from the movie Slapshot. But that movie was based on the old hockey leagues in the 1970s, including in Syracuse, New York, when the stories my father told me about what happened in the War Memorial stands, my eyes bugged out. My mouth hit the floor. Like, what are you talking about? And we could do a whole podcast on those stories. Maybe we should, given this is the 30th anniversary of the Syracuse Crunch. But despite that and those great stories, Syracuse became somewhat of a hockey graveyard, right? There were just too many professional hockey teams that did not work here. So there was a long period of time where there was not a professional hockey team here. So to think about, we're entering the 30th year of the Syracuse Crunch here in Syracuse after the failures of some teams that came before them. You can't take that for granted, that you've got a professional franchise here entering year 30, the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations, how professional sports have changed. But there they have been the whole time. And to think about year 30, that's pretty darn special. I was there on September 30th, 1994, opening night. And this was the fall. So the New York Rangers had just won the Stanley Cup in June, right? And this was the fall after that. This was the season that followed. And at the time, now, I'll date myself a little bit here, I was a sophomore in high school at the time. I wasn't a huge hockey fan. And one of the reasons I was not a hockey fan was we didn't have a team here. I didn't even know. My dad and I drove to some Utica Devils games back in the day. Marty Brodeur used to play for the Devils back at the time. But I wasn't a huge hockey guy because I just didn't really have a reason to. I didn't play hockey. We didn't have a hockey team around. It just wasn't on my radar. From that moment forward, when my dad brought me to that game, I was hooked. I was in. And I have been a big hockey fan, not just of the teams that I follow, but just of the sport since. And it wasn't just the sport. It was the way the Crunch presented, not only that night, but have continued to do over the years. They were the first American Hockey League team to do an outdoor game. They did the Carrier Dome game in 2014, 30,000 people watching hockey in the Dome. The various promotions and celebrities and giveaways and just how the Crunch have, from day one, appealed to the fan, made it worth your money to go, And that's why they're here 30 years later. That's why hockey works in this town. And the man that's been behind it the whole time, who came in as an outsider and now just, he can say it, it's our town, right? Syracuse, New York, is Howard Dolgon, the owner of the Syracuse Crunch. Howard and I walked down memory lane a little bit, things that have worked, things that didn't. When is the Crunch going to do that one thing they really haven't in 30 years? Win the Calder Cup. That's pretty much the only thing that's missing. We also covered some interesting ground on the future. How long can the Crunch play in the War Memorial as it stands now? There is going to be a push here to maybe build a new facility in Syracuse, New York. And Howard is one of the voices saying it's time to do that. So we had a wide-ranging conversation. I know you'll enjoy it. Howard is always great to catch up with, terrific storyteller, and just somebody that knows the professional sports business well. And he's got a hockey team turning 30 years old here in Syracuse this year when the Crunch dropped the puck on the 2023-24 season. Opening night is October 14th, and the Crunch will do it right. There'll be a whole lot of events happening that night and a big celebration of hockey in this town 30 years later. So what do you say we talk to Howard Dolgon about all that? Okay, Howard Dolgon, I want you to picture this. It's September 30th, 1994, and I magically appear at your side on opening night, and I tap you on the shoulder and I say, Howard, I am from the future. I am from 30 years in the future. And I just want you to know that this hockey team is still doing it. What would you have said?
I would have probably said, yeah, I figured that, I mean, we, from day one, we made a commitment for the long haul. And we were faced with a lot of skepticism and critics and doubters. And it was for a number of reasons. I mean, one, which was legitimate, was that teams had failed miserably, several of them over a short period of time in the market. That was a legitimate reason for people to be skeptical about us. The other one, which was a little disappointing always to me, was, we were viewed as, the big city people. I had an office in New York. I ran a business in New York. I lived on Long Island. And the skepticism was, well, they're going to get tired of this small town and take their team and leave. And there were some people who were, for whatever reason, would write totally false things on the internet about, I was spotted somewhere meeting with another arena that I had never been to. And, they heard from a reliable source that we were leaving. And that really was probably the first 3, 4, or 5 years. And that was the more disappointing thing. But, when we committed to the market back in 93, really, to try to get the team, and then when it became a reality in 94, May of 94, it was, hey, we're gonna live in that market, we're gonna grow the market, and we're gonna prove people wrong. And the fact that it had failed miserably so many times, really for us was incentive to make it work when other people couldn't. And it is still a challenge, like owning any sports team should be. But, we're still standing, 30 years later.
Howard, let's remind people how it ended up here. Why Syracuse was the market you ended up with. Were you just looking to buy a team in any sport? Were you focused on hockey? Why did it end up Syracuse, New York, 1993? You start an American Hockey League franchise here.
So to make a real long story short, I had, I had a sports PR marketing agency in Manhattan. I had a client, Black Velvet Whiskey, which was a whiskey brand predominant in the Northeast, in Syracuse, Buffalo. And at the time, the brand manager asked me if I would negotiate. They had been approached by the American Hockey League, which at the time was really primarily in the Northeast and in Eastern Canada. Would I help negotiate a deal with the American League's VP of marketing? So the guy came into my office, a guy named Bob Arablo. And ironically, my partner, Alan Taylor, knew Bob because Bob had interned for him at World Team Tennis. The first version of it with Billie Jean King.
How about that?
Way back when. So Bob wanted a ridiculous amount of money for the sponsorship. He settled for about 20% of what he wanted. But we struck up a good friendship. He knew I was a big hockey fan. I had Ranger season tickets at the time. And so we kept in touch, and, we were working on the sponsorship together. And then a few months later, he called me up and said, hey, listen, I'm going to throw this out there. I know you're a big hockey guy. There's an opportunity in Syracuse, New York. Would you be interested in owning a team there? And he said, listen, it's a great location. We had at the time Adirondack, Albany, Binghamton, and Rochester in the league. You'd be the 5th New York State team. He said the only issue, there are several issues there. One, they have no ownership group. Two, it's a building that's pretty old that had done some renovation with mostly on its ice surface, and got rid of a lot of asbestos and replaced some seating. So he said, but if you want, I'll set up a meeting for you, county executive, mayor, people who run the building, and a guy named Brian Elwell, he said, who, was a former player, but he was leading the local grassroots effort and had been doing it for years. So I'm like, sure, So I called Vasily him up. I said, how'd you like to take a flight with me to Syracuse? We met Nick Piero, we met Ed Cochin. Peter Capicelli was representing the local business group up there. Peter, who became the director of the State Fair, and Brian Elwell. And then we met with the people running the building at the time. And we left saying, you know what? Like, I spent my career at that time in PR. I'd been in it since 81. It's about 12 years. And I spent it promoting events, big boxing matches, Olympics, World Cup, but primarily representing big companies that are involved in sports. And I said, well, if I could do that with other brands, what can I do with my own? So we walked away. We reached an agreement, an exclusive window to try to bring a team in. I put together an ownership group, which was pretty easy to do. Peter helped me get some local interest. I thought that was important. It was a small portion, was local money. And we said, okay, let's find an NHL partner. At the time, though, there were two minor leagues. There was the International League, which was in big markets like Chicago, Detroit, Minnesota, Utah. They were in Long Beach, San Diego. And there was the American League, which was, like I mentioned, in the Northeast corridor of North America and in smaller cities. And the American League was looked at as more of a league that was developing future talent. The International League had established NHL players that were past their prime, but there were names. And combined, there were probably 32 to 34 teams. And at the time, I think there were only like maybe 26 or 28 National League teams. So, it didn't work, right? You would have some teams without affiliates. And the American League, you couldn't do that. So what we had to do was, the biggest thing we had to do was find a partner. So I got tipped off by a guy named Tom Mitchell, who was the owner of the Binghamton Rangers at the time, that there were problems in Hamilton. The local ownership group was running out of money. The Vancouver Canucks were the affiliate there. And so I reached out to George McPhee, who was the assistant general manager for Vancouver at the time. Long story short, George and I kept in touch. We kept in touch. The local ownership group in Hamilton went belly up. So Vancouver took it over for the remainder of the season. George and I kept in touch. I reached out to a number of other teams, had some significant conversations, but I always felt that the most serious and the best opportunity was going to be Vancouver. And finally, I kept getting extensions from the county. Mm-hmm. I said, listen, I'm being honest. Here's where I'm at. Like, I'm going down the road. I'm going to get this done, but I need more time. And they kept believing in us. And finally, in early May or late April, actually, ironically, I was at a hockey game in Tampa. And they were playing at the time in the baseball stadium. And I had negotiated with Tampa a deal. Phyllis Mazzito was the president of the team at the time. And when he sent his counter offer in by fax to my office, it was so off based on anything we could do that I politely declined it. Well,
Wow.
fast forward, I'm in Tampa or Clearwater, Florida, for a beach volleyball event that a client of mine was sponsoring, and I got invited to the game by the new president of the Lightning. This is going back to '94.
So when the Lightning first came into the league, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in his suite, and he says, I wish you had dealt with me. We need to be in Syracuse. And I said, well, I'll be honest, I'm very far down the road with Vancouver. And just during that conversation, my beeper went off. And it was a 604 number, which is Vancouver. So it turned out it was the CFO of the Canucks, who we were negotiating the final deal points. And he said, we're done. We got a deal. So I remember going back in the suite and saying, listen, I want to be totally transparent with you. I just closed the deal with the Canucks. You can't tell anybody because I haven't been approved by the league, and he was good about it. And then a week later, we're in Boston, and we get the green light. And that night, I fly to Syracuse, and the next day, we have a press conference with about 1,500 to 1,700 people there.
There's a lot there, Howard. That's incredible. I don't think you and I have spoken many times over the years. I don't think I've ever heard that story because it comes full circle, because obviously now the Tampa Bay Lightning are your affiliate, but they could have been from the beginning, and you would have two expansion teams coming in together. Wow, that's incredible to hear. I love the beeper and the fax machine references and how time changes through you're doing business. But here we are 30 years later, right? After you get on the ground, the team comes, you have an incredible opening night, and just there's so much that I'm sure you're reflecting on after 30 years, and we're going to see that celebrated through the season. But now that you're here at year 30, why, and you said it at the beginning, like you're taking over and you had incentive to revive a hockey ghost town. So why does hockey work here now?
Well, I think, what was important to us was to dig deep into the grassroots right away and grow the youth hockey program. And it really skyrocketed pretty early on. Having a pro team in town, really energized younger kids to, hey, I want to play hockey, right? At the same time, we came in the league. The Rangers won a cup in '94. They beat Vancouver of all teams. And, Bettman had taken over as commissioner. So you now had a business person running the sport instead of hockey people. And I think, the profile of the sport, with the Rangers winning the cup, cover of Sports Illustrated, that was the timing. We were fortunate in that respect. And, the growth of the NHL and the subsequent growth of the American League, when we actually brought teams in, about 6 teams in for the IHL, and that league went away. It kind of strengthened our league. And I always felt that the people in Syracuse, I always compared us to like Green Bay, right? Like that little market that could. And when it came time to do special events like the first ever outdoor game, right? Or even before that, hosting the All-Star game in just our 3rd year, right? Then the first ever outdoor game. And people, here's the thing about the outdoor game. When the NHL does it, the league really doesn't. And the league has the resources, the staffing. When we did the game, it was the same staff that had to do the other 39.
Everything else. Yeah. Run a season and everything you normally do.
Right.
Yeah.
So the cooperation we got there from the county, I mean, we had convicts shoveling snow the day before the game. That was truth. And the convicts were basically putting the extra bleachers together. Little things like that we had done. We do that. In 2014, we turn around and do the first ever pro game in the Dome, set the record. And it was always, why not Syracuse? Like, why can't we have the same events they had at Fenway Park, right? The outdoor game. Why can't we do the big indoor games like they do in Michigan and other markets? So, I always felt that we were a minor league team, but we should never treat it like a minor league event. And that was from day one. Like, people in Syracuse deserved the big time. And I think there was, when we came in, and again, the New York PR guy and all that stuff, there was some positives to that, because people were excited that we had the mindset to be different. But we still had to deliver, right? And hopefully we'll continue to perform above expectations.
Howard, you hit on a couple of big ones there. The outdoor hockey game, the first one at the AHL level, and this was 2009. This was when these things were just becoming a concept again. 2010, right. And you led the way on that in the American Hockey League. The Dome game, which was Hockey Town, USA for a day. It was an incredible experience to see 30,000 people watching hockey in that facility. So those are big events and things that you're known for. You've done so many promotions over the years, and we could check a lot of boxes here. So maybe it's one of those things. But let me ask you this. 30 years later, what are you most proud of?
Probably bringing hockey back to Syracuse. And I probably could have said that when I first came, because I was an outsider to the market, right? But getting to know people, business leaders, community leaders, fans, watching children grow up in our arena over 30 years, families that take their kids, and every year I turn around and, now they're married and they have children. So being able to bring a sport that I love and I think is probably the most exciting sport to watch in person, for people to be able to enjoy it, that probably is the overall most satisfying thing. Now, there are events certainly that, like you mentioned, probably the outdoor game, because we were the first, and there was so much risk with the weather, and really not knowing if people would want to go to an outdoor game. Like, you go through the airport, right? And people would tell me after we announced it, "Oh, we're coming," but you never know, right? But then, after tickets went on sale, like, we knew. Same thing with the Dome game. Like, we knew within a week that we were killing it, because of the initial reaction. But, when you do big events like that, you are taking a risk. You're taking a chance, for sure.
What are some things, because Howard, you're never afraid to try things and get out there and let's do it and let's see it. And that's an example of one that worked well. And maybe you didn't know until you showed up and there's 30,000 people at the Dome. There's a state fairgrounds full, a grandstand that no longer exists, by the way, as time has passed here. What are some of the things, though, you tried that you're glad you did, but maybe they didn't quite work?
Oh, one for sure that, we had a group, I think it was a 70s group called the Jets, that actually had 3 or 4 or 5, 8 hit songs. But the mistake we made with them was they played after the game, right? And I think we lost the game. People just wanted to get home.
Oh boy!
So we had, I think we had a sold out crowd, and yet we had maybe 300 people at the concert. But then you look back when we had the Village people, we lost our game, I think, to Albany 7-1. Nobody left, right? So it was obviously there was a greater affinity for the Village people than there were for the Jets, right? That group. So I think that, I don't regret really trying anything, to be honest with you. It's still a learning experience. I think Jim Sorois and I were speaking my last trip in last week, about just remaining edgy, right? Like, always try to be out in front. And when you do that, you're doing things that are done a lot of times for the first time. So you're really taking a chance on it. And you're trying to judge the market. And what did P.T. Barnum once said? No one ever went broke, underestimated the taste of the American public, right? And they did outlandish, but it's outlandish, but it's still going to be tempered somewhat. right? And what's happened in our game is the hockey has just gotten so damn good. Like, we're the second best league in the world, and you can be at our game, and if you didn't know it was the National League, you think it was. That's how fast the game is. That's how skilled the players are. And with the price point being just so affordable, and affordable especially compared to Major League Sports. So I'll give you an example. So unfortunately, I'm a Giant fan, a New York football team.
Yeah, right now
It is. Listen,
that's not good.
Like, you got to take the good with the bad, right? And last night was as bad as it could be. Hopefully, right? They're a bad football team. But one of my sons lives in South Florida, where I am, right? So I'm like, let's go to the Giant Miami game Sunday, right? Miami's a great place to watch a game. It's a great stadium. I don't know if you've been there, but you go in shorts. How bad could it be? It's great. So
great way to put
with
it.
the Dolphins being so good, it's not easy. Getting tickets. There's a demand for them, right? And when the Giants come down here, it's still probably going to be 50% Giant fans. So I called a buddy of mine who worked for us in Syracuse, who works for the Giants now. I said, listen, I want to buy tickets. I need 5. And he said, okay, I'll call my counterpart at the Dolphins. So he sent me the options, and I bought 2 tickets, and they're okay seats. But do you have any idea what they cost?
Can I take a guess?
Yeah.
So they're okay seats. Like you said, Miami's a little more in demand. A lot of Giant fans there.
And I got face value on the seats, though.
I'm going to say $500.
$515. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm taking 2 of my sons. We do a Giant road trip every year. So we're going to Vegas. And I went through the Giant contact, gave me the ticket manager of Vegas. And I'm in the corner on the second level at $410 a ticket.
Jeez.
So
just getting in. Yeah.
Right. So when you're coming to see our games at $25, or if you buy it as a group for $18, I mean, and you've seen the kind of quality, you're realizing you're getting value, right? That's what and more now you realize that the major leagues are just they're out of control. And that's
it's amazing that they get some of the attendance that they do. It really is. Yeah. And you brought up the value of it. And, there's some nights you're coming to downtown Syracuse, it's 10 degrees out, and, well, you don't have too long of a walk. Like, that's a challenge to get people to do these things. And if you can give them the value they're looking for, that's what you continue to do. But I did want to ask you about the building, because part of the value of and the demand for a Crunch game is there's only a certain amount of seats, right? You're in a 6,000 seat facility. What is kind of the conversation about playing at the War Memorial now? Certainly some improvements have been made, and I think it's up to the best standards it can be given the age of the facility. But we're thinking about 30 years in. Let's think about going ahead another 10, 20, 30 years. What's going to happen with the War Memorial for you to continue to play there, have it be up to the standards of the American Hockey League, and continue to be the value that you're talking about?
So first and foremost, like we greatly appreciate what the county has done, beginning with Dick Pura and coaching, Joni Mahoney and Bill Fisher, and now Ryan McMahon and his numerous deputies. They stepped up when we needed upgrades, both to the what people see, so the suites, the scoreboards, and then what people don't see, which are our training facilities downstairs, which probably rival a lot of NHL, especially, we have a video theater now that seats 25. It's like you're at the movies, right? So they've done, and they've been very gracious in doing what they can to take what exists and make it better. I think we all know that at the end of the day, we all want a new facility, not just for the Crunch, but for those 30 or 40 concerts that are not stopping in Syracuse because there's nowhere for them to play. There's nowhere. Uh, Not just concerts, other events. I mean, we were in the center of the state, right? And whether it's youth hockey championships or youth basketball championships, or so many things. I mean, I've had conversations with my friend John Wildhack that if we had a new building, we'd love to have the women's SU hockey team D1 play, and John would support that, you know. So there are so many more events you could put in the building. It's just a matter of, you know, how do we get this done? Now, to me, the timing could not be better. You've got a great commitment from Micron. You know, over the next, 7 or 8 years, you're going to have 45,000 jobs, which means you're going to have probably another 130 to 150,000 people living in Syracuse. I mean, that's going to, you know, increase the capacity by, probably 30% or the population. That's a lot. I mean, it's going to affect the schools,
big infusion,
the restaurants, and everything. But it's also going to affect, okay, how do we entertain these people? You know, we want everyone to be happy living here, and it's quality of life. So at some point, you know, and we've started having those discussions hypothetically, and we brought in some people to look into what a new arena would cost, where would we put it? There are options. And I think it's something that should and will get supported as long as the economics work, right? Nobody wants to go into debt. Everyone wants someone else to pay for this.
Right.
I'm sure where the state kicked in $800 million for the new Buffalo Stadium. And, you know, listen, they didn't want to lose the Bills. It's too important in Buffalo. So, you know, I think it's something certainly that we're discussing now. We actually had meetings on it when I was in town on Friday. We'll continue to push it forward aggressively. And I see no reason why everyone should not get around this, both the politicians, the business leaders, and the people in the community who are going to benefit from it. This is not about the crunch. You know, we're going to be a tenant in there, right? We're going to host anywhere from 36 to 50 events, which is great, right? But concerts, circus, wrestling, you know, the list goes on and on and on. And, you know, that's what it's about. And our town deserves it. Syracuse deserves it, right? The people there are great, hardworking people, you know, proud of where they live. I've learned that over 30 years. The people are wonderful. They test you, you know. They're not quick to trust you. It took a long time for them to trust me and us. But once they do, they're loyal. They are fiercely loyal. And they are passionate. And that's why our fans are among the best in the league. Or among the best in all of hockey, I should say. Because of the passion and the care factor.
And Howard, I was struck by something you just said there, because you came in as an outsider and had to earn that trust. You said our town.
Yeah.
Right? I think you earned that after 30 years.
Ben,
that you could say that.
I wish I had counted my hotel nights from day one. Because I'm thinking at the least I've averaged 50 a year. So you're looking at 1,500 hotel nights, which is roughly 4 years, right? So that's 4 years, you know, that's a long time, a lot of time spent there, you know, and I've enjoyed most of it for sure. You know, listen, when we lose a game, the starting game in overtime at home, I feel terrible for days because I'm still a fan. Like I'm a fan like the other 6,000 people at the games, and the people who see me at the games know that.
Oh yeah.
I'm like it's emotion for 2.5 hours for me, and I wouldn't have it any other way, you know.
Well, that leads me to my last point with you here, Howard. We've talked about everything that's led up to this point, a lot of things beyond the game, events surrounding the game. Let's end on a hockey note here, because there's one thing missing, right? And that's the Calder Cup. You've had 2 shots at it. You have an incredible organization that you're affiliated with now, of course, in Tampa Bay, who the Crunch have sent a number of players to the Tampa Bay Lightning in that affiliation, and you have spoken so warmly about that partnership, and that track record speaks for itself in this organization. That's all that's left, though, is to get that Calder Cup back to Syracuse. The first team to win the Calder Cup in 1936, the old Syracuse Stars. That's all that's left, and that's got to be frustrating in this sense, Howard. That's the one thing you don't control, right? That's all on Tampa to make that happen for you.
Well, I mean, we don't, and nor do any of the American League affiliates, but we do have the relationship where we are talking about players, and they've always listened. At the end of the day, it's their decision. I understand that, but I also know they have a partner that actually wants us to win a Calder Cup, that realizes the importance, and they've seen when players play in the kind of games in the Calder Cup playoffs and the finals, how they mature, and you see how that translates into winning Stanley Cups. And you can name so many players that, from Tyler Johnson to Yanni Gourde and Andre Palat and, Andrei Vasilevsky, Nikita Kucherov, for a short time, Braden Point, on and on and on. Eric Chernak. The list goes on. So they understand the formula that you need. But here's what you also need. You need to get lucky. You need to be healthy. You need to get good goaltending. And, you need to peak at the right time. And we did it twice. And, I always look back at the first year and, no excuses, but Radko Gudas blowing out his knee in a 7-0 semifinal clinching game to only miss the first 5 games of the finals and then come back and be ineffective in game 6. What happens if he doesn't get hurt, right? I mean, at the time, he was a number 1 D-man.
He's still in the NHL as we speak.
And a fierce player. So, a puck goes off a defenseman's butt, goes in to decide game 6. So, man, it is hard. It's hard really for the players because they're not flying private. They're playing intense games over a 2-month period. And you go into the dressing room after the game and, you see the ice packs and the emotion, knowing, they got practice the next day, or they got to get on a bus or a commercial flight. So every year we go in with optimism. We've got every reason to be optimistic with our partners. And, got to get first to the playoffs. And then, all those other factors become real. Health, luck, and goaltending. It's a hell of a combination.
That's what it comes down to.
But it really does. You need to have normally the better goaltender at the right time. And you see it in the NHL, and again you see Tampa's 2 rings. Mr. Vasilevsky there's a reason why he won the MVP, right?
There's a reason he's going to the Hall of Fame now. Yeah. Exactly. And it all started for him in Syracuse on a very long list of players.
Yep.
Howard, it's always great to catch up with you. Congratulations on 30 years. I'm excited to see the year-long celebration and hearing some of the old names coming back and honoring some of those fans that have been there from day one. There's going to be so much more here to come and reflecting back on it. But we're also looking forward to the next 30 years and what's to come on that. But we thank you so much for your time today coming on with us here on Syracuse Sports. And, we'll do it again soon, my friend.
And, it's always good talking to you because, you're a guy, I'm not saying this because we're talking, but you have always been tough but fair. You're not a journalist who, wants to win a popularity contest. You want to report and give your commentary, whether we agree or not. But you're prepared always, and you're fair, and you're a rarity nowadays in journalism. So we appreciate you, and hopefully hopefully you'll be there the 14th.
Thank you. I will definitely be there throughout the year. I was there on opening night, September 30th, 1994, and we'll be there to witness it all here in year 30. And thank you for the nice comments and for coming on with us, Howard. We'll do it again soon, my friend.
I hope so, buddy. Thanks.